In the mountains, hunger does not always arrive with drama. Sometimes it arrives quietly. It arrives as a thin pantry shelf, a canning jar that is almost empty, a garden that is still weeks away from giving anything back. And in those moments, the most important sound in the world is not thunder on the ridge. It is a pot beginning to simmer. Because in Appalachia, food has always been more than food. It is memory. It is survival. It is a kind of home you can taste. And what many people forget is that some of the most meaningful Appalachian dishes were never meant to be famous. They were meant to be possible, made for what the land gave, what the cellar held, and what a family could afford. Tonight, we are going back into those kitchens. 25 forgotten Appalachian dishes. Some were born from deep poverty, some from isolation, some from seasons that did not always cooperate, and some from the simple truth that you do not waste what you work to gather. And there is one dish in this story that begins with a plant many outsiders used to call a weed. People cooked it anyway. People love it anyway. Stay with me. We'll get there. Appalachia is not one small place. It is a long spine of mountains and valleys stretching across many states, with communities that grew up in hollers, on ridges, and along winding creeks. For generations, life here could be physically isolated, even when towns were not far as the crow flies. Roads were rough. Winters were hard. Money could be scarce. Work might come from farming, timber, or later, from coal and industry that rose and fell like the seasons. Food became important because it had to. Families depended on gardens, small livestock, hunting, foraging, and preserving. Cornmeal, beans, and pork were steady. Greens came when they could. Apples might carry you through fall, then show up again in winter as dried slices or butter in a jar. People learned to stretch. They learned to save. They learned to make a little taste like enough. So as we walk through these dishes, picture the scenes behind them. A wood stove in winter. A skillet warming on a summer evening. Hands that know what they're doing, not because of a cookbook, but because the same meals have been made 100 times before. We start in early spring, when the mountains are still cold, but the woods begin to wake up. Ramp and potato skillet was a meal that tasted like the season turning. Ramps are wild onions, sharp and fragrant, gathered from the forest floor. In many homes, they were fried with sliced potatoes in a cast iron skillet, sometimes with a bit of fat saved from pork. People ate it because it was fresh food after a winter of storage foods. It mattered because spring greens helped bodies recover from lean months. The human detail is the smell. Ramp smell could fill a whole house and cling to coats, like proof that spring finally arrived. Not long after ramps, another wild food appeared that outsiders often misunderstood. Poke salad was made from young pokeweed greens, carefully gathered and cooked the way experienced families knew was safe. A simple version often involved boiling and draining the greens more than once, then frying them with fat and seasoning. People ate it because it was free, early, and abundant when gardens were not yet producing. It mattered because foraging could bridge the gap between winter and planting season. The human detail is the caution. In many families, only certain people handled poke because knowledge was part of the meal. As spring pushed forward, the woods were not the only place to find food. Gardens and yard patches started offering something tender and bright. Killed lettuce, sometimes called wilted lettuce salad, was a simple dish that felt like a reward for the first greens. Lettuce, spring onions, and sometimes a few radishes were topped with a hot dressing made from bacon grease and vinegar, poured over to wilt the leaves. People ate it because it used small amounts of precious bacon to flavor a whole bowl. It mattered because it brought freshness to a table that might still feel winter heavy. The human detail is the sound of the hot dressing hitting the greens. A quick sizzle that signals the salad is ready. From spring greens, we move into the most reliable year-round dinner in countless Appalachian homes. Soup, beans, and cornbread was not a special occasion meal. It was a foundation. Pinto beans simmered for hours with salt and sometimes a ham bone or fatback for flavor, served with cornbread baked in a skillet. People ate it because it was cheap, filling, and could feed everyone without much meat. It mattered because beans and corn were dependable when money was not. The human detail is the pot staying on the stove with a lid that lifts again and again because someone always wants a little more broth. And when the beans were done, there was a humble way to make that cornbread stretch even further. Cornbread and milk was a bowl that could be supper, snack, or comfort depending on the house. Cornbread crumbled into a bowl, then covered with milk or buttermilk, sometimes salted, sometimes lightly sweetened. People ate it because it was quick and filling, and it used leftovers without waste. It mattered because it could feed kids fast when the day ran long. The human detail is the bowl held close, warm cornbread softening as it soaks, turning yesterday's bread into something gentle. But what many people forget is how many Appalachian meals were built around a second kind of bread that cooked fast and traveled well. Hoe cakes were simple cornmeal cakes cooked on a hot skillet or griddle. A basic version used cornmeal, water or buttermilk, salt, and a little fat when available. They were eaten with beans, with greens, or with whatever the pantry held. People ate them because they did not require an oven and they came together quickly. It mattered because fast bread meant you could still eat while even on busy work days. The human detail is the crisp edge, browned and smoky, broken by hand and eaten standing at the counter. From quick breads, we move to a dish that looks unusual until you realize it is a perfect example of thrift. Bean bread was a way to turn cooked beans into something sliceable and shareable. In some homes, beans were mashed and mixed in a cornbread batter, then baked in a skillet until firm. It tasted hearty and slightly sweet from the corn. People ate it because it stretched both beans and cornmeal into a new form that felt different from a bowl of soup beans. It mattered because variety keeps morale up when ingredients repeat. The human detail is the slice, dense and warm, eaten with a smear of grease or a pinch of salt. Now we step into summer, when gardens were busy and the challenge shifted from finding food to saving it. Leather breeches were green beans preserved by stringing and drying them, then storing them for winter. Later, those dried beans were simmered until tender, often with a bit of pork for flavor. People ate them because drying was a practical way to preserve without refrigeration. It mattered because it carried summer into winter, when fresh vegetables were scarce. The human detail is the string. Many families remember beans hanging in long strands, like decorations in a kitchen that smelled like wood smoke and sun. And what came next was even more tied to the pantry, because it preserved two crops at once. Shucky beans were a mix of beans and corn, often cut from the cob and dried together for storage. Later, they were cooked into a stew-like dish with water, salt, and sometimes fatback or a ham bone. People ate them because they were shelf-stable and deeply filling. They mattered because they were a winter safety net made from summer labor. The human detail is the first stir of the pot, when dried kernels and beans begin to swell, and the kitchen starts to smell like a harvest brought back to life. Of course, greens were not only spring food. In many homes, they were a year-round goal, grown when possible and cooked when available. Turnip greens with pot liquor was both meal and medicine in some families. Turnip greens were simmered slowly, often with a piece of smoked meat or fatback, creating a rich broth known as pot liquor. People ate it because greens were nutritious and inexpensive, and the broth carried flavor and strength. It mattered because it offered vitamins when the diet leaned heavy on starch. The human detail is the cornbread, a crumble or wedge used to soak up pot liquor, because leaving that broth behind felt unthinkable. From greens, many Appalachian tables moved to corn again, but in a form that tastes like summer at its peak. Fried corn with bacon grease was made from fresh corn cut from the cob and cooked in a skillet, often with onion and a spoon of bacon grease. It was sweet, smoky, and deeply satisfying. People ate it because fresh corn was abundant in season and a little fat made it feel rich. It mattered because it was a way to make vegetables feel like a main dish. The human detail is the sound, corn popping softly in a hot pan, with the smell pulling people into the kitchen. As summer turned toward late season, tomatoes began to take over the counter, and Appalachian kitchens did something clever with them. Tomato gravy and biscuits was comfort food that looked plain and tasted like home. Tomatoes, often canned or cooked down, were thickened with flour in a skillet and seasoned simply, then served over biscuits. Some families made it tangy. Others made it mild. People ate it because tomatoes were affordable and could be preserved, and biscuits made the meal filling. It mattered because it turned pantry staples into warmth. The human detail is the biscuit torn open by hand, soaking up red gravy until the plate looks empty. And if there's one kind of biscuit that belongs to mountain kitchens, it is the big, rough, no-nonsense kind. Cathead biscuits with apple butter were named because they were as big as a cat's head, at least in family stories. Made from flour, fat, and buttermilk when available, they were baked and served warm with apple butter spread thick. People ate them because biscuits were cheap and filling, and apple butter preserved the orchard's sweetness for months. It mattered because it made breakfast or supper feel comforting without expensive ingredients. The human detail is the jar lid popping loose, the dark apple scent rising like fall. But biscuits were not only for sweet spreads. In many homes, they were the foundation for a meal that could carry a working day. Sausage gravy was made with sausage browned in a pan, then thickened with flour and milk into a peppery gravy, poured over biscuits. In leaner homes, the sausage might be minimal, used mostly for flavor. People ate it because it was filling and used inexpensive ingredients to create a rich taste. It mattered because fat and flour could fuel hard labor. The human detail is the pepper. A few extra shakes, and suddenly the whole kitchen smells like a warm, serious meal. From breakfast for supper, we move to a pot that shows up in Appalachian memory like a soft blanket. Chicken and dumplings was built for stretching. A chicken, sometimes a stewing hen, simmered into broth with onions and whatever vegetables were available. Then dumplings made from flour and fat were dropped in to make it hearty. People ate it because it fed many mouths from one pot. It mattered because dumplings turned broth into a full meal. The human detail is the lid lifting. Steam rolls out, and the dumplings sit puffed on top, like the pot has been working all day to keep a promise. But what many people forget is that in some Appalachian households, meat did not always come from store. Squirrel gravy over biscuits was a dish tied to hunting and necessity. Squirrel meat was browned or simmered. Then the drippings were turned into a simple gravy, served over biscuits to stretch the portion. People ate it because game was available when money was not, and gravy made small amounts feel larger. It mattered because hunting was part of survival in remote areas. The human detail is the careful eating. Small bones were expected, and nobody complained because the meal was earned. Another game dish, often remembered in colder months, was built around slow cooking and patience. Rabbit stew was made from rabbit simmered with onions, potatoes, and whatever vegetables the kitchen had. Some homes thickened it slightly, others kept it brothy. People ate it because rabbit was lean, affordable if hunted, and stew made it tender. It mattered because one animal could become multiple servings when stretched with potatoes. The human detail is the pot sitting close to the stove's warm side, not boiling hard, just gently working while the house settles into night. From stews and gravies, Appalachian cooking also made room for something crisp, bright, and familiar, especially when gardens were full. Salmon patties might sound surprising in the mountains, but canned salmon traveled well and became common in many working households. Mixed with crumbs or mashed potato, shaped and fried, it created a satisfying dinner with a crisp edge. People ate it because canned fish was shelf-stable protein, and fry made it feel special. It mattered because it offered variety when meat was scarce. The human detail is the skillet smell, that salty richness that makes the whole kitchen feel busy. And when gardens produced more than families could eat fresh, fried dishes helped use what was available right now. Fried green tomatoes were sliced, coated in cornmeal or flour, and fried until crisp. They were tart, crunchy, and deeply southern Appalachian in spirit, though variations existed from one valley to the next. People ate them because unripe tomatoes did not have to be wasted. It mattered because it turned not ready into ready, and it filled plates when money was tight. The human detail is the first bite, hot and crisp, eaten too soon because the smell is impossible to ignore. As the year moved on, potatoes returned again and again because they stored well and could become almost anything. Tater cakes were often made from leftover mashed potatoes mixed with a little flour and seasoning, then fried into crisp edge cakes. Some homes added onion. Some added a bit of bacon grease for flavor. People ate them because leftovers were valuable and potatoes were cheap. It mattered because it turned yesterday's side dish into today's meal. The human detail is the skillet's rhythm, flip after flip, as the cakes brown and the kitchen smells like comfort on a tight budget. When winter truly settled in, the mountain table leaned hard on storage foods. Boiled cabbage and potatoes was plain, filling, and deeply familiar. Cabbage kept well. Potatoes kept well. Together, they made a pot that could feed a family without much cost. Some homes added a bit of salt pork or a smoked piece for flavor, but many did not. People ate it because it was what lasted. It mattered because it offered warm calories when the cold felt personal. The human detail is the smell that fills the house, sharp and honest, and the way everyone eats quietly because it is hot and it is there. And if the cellar held a crock, another winter dish brought a tang that could cut through heavy meals. Sauerkraut and beans was a combination that sounds simple, but made sense. Sauerkraut kept through cold months and brought strong flavor. Beans added bulk and protein. In some homes, pork joined the pot. In others, it stayed meatless. People ate it because it used preserved food wisely and filled bowls without much money. It mattered because preservation was survival. The human detail is the first whiff when the pot lid comes off, that sharp sour scent that wakes the whole kitchen. Now, there's a dish that is not exactly a meal by itself, but in Appalachian homes, it could change everything on the plate. Chow chow relish was a jarred mix of chopped vegetables, often green tomatoes, cabbage, onions, and peppers, pickled into something bright and sharp. Families used it to top beans, cornbread, or any plain plate that needed life. People ate it because pickling preserved garden surplus and added flavor when meals were repetitive. It mattered because tang can make simple food feel exciting. The human detail is the jar on the table, passed hand to hand, everyone adding just enough to make their bowl taste like theirs. And when winter days felt long, Appalachian kitchens had one more trick. A handheld comfort that could be carried to the porch, the barn, or a neighbor's house. Fried apple pies were made from dried apples or apple filling sealed in dough and fried until crisp and golden. They were portable, filling, and tasted like the orchard even when trees were bare. People ate them because apples were common, and drying and frying made them last and travel. They mattered because a simple sweet could lift spirits in hard seasons. The human detail is the crimped edge, pressed with a fork, a small sign that someone took time. And finally, we end with a dessert that feels like a mountain story in cake form. Stack cake was built from thin layers, often made with molasses or spice, stacked with apple butter or dried fruit filling between them. Over time, the layers softened into one rich, sliceable cake. People ate it because it could be made from shelf-stable ingredients, and it was perfect for gatherings when you wanted something special without store-bought luxury. It mattered because it turned thrift into celebration. The human detail is the waiting. Stacked cake was often best after it sat. Like the cake needed time to become itself. By the time you step back from these dishes, you start to see the deeper pattern. Appalachian food was shaped by seasons, by distance, and by the need to waste nothing. It was shaped by gardens, smokehouses, crocks, and jars. It was shaped by hands that knew how to forage in spring, preserve in summer, and stretch in winter. But what many people forget is that these meals were also emotional. They were a way to keep a family steady when money was thin, a way to turn a hard day into a warm plate, a way to say, without speaking, you belong here. You will be fed. So if any of these dishes sound simple, that is the point. Simplicity was not a lack of skill. It was a kind of wisdom, a way of cooking that respected the land and respected the work it took to bring food home. And maybe that is why these forgotten Appalachian dishes still matter now, because they carry something we recognize, even if we have never lived in a hollow or cooked on a wood stove. They carry resilience. They carry care. And they carry the quiet promise that as long as the pot still simmers, the story is not over. Appalachia region typically refers to the cultural region of the central and southern portions of the range. They range from the Catskill Mountains of New York Southwest to the Blue Ridge Mountains. The Native Americans first began to gather in the Appalachian Mountains approximately 16,000 years ago. Cherokee Indians are believed to be the main Native American group of the Southern Appalachian and Blue Ridge regions. However, there are also more clans like Iroquois, Powhatan, and Shawnee people. Later on, there was the arrival of enslaved Africans in the area who joined the Native Appalachian clans, which date back to the 16th century. The two groups of enslaved Africans had a tremendous influence on the culture of Appalachia. Below are the top 10 facts about the Native Appalachian Mountains people. The Cherokee occupied numerous towns along river valleys and mountain ridges. The Cherokee Indians are known to be the native population of the Appalachian Mountains. They occupied these areas way before the 16th century when the enslaved Africans joined them. Their culture was so unique, as was clear from how they lived. The Cherokee Indians majorly occupied several towns throughout the river valleys and mountain ridges of their homelands. Some of their towns were called the Lower Towns. These lower towns were found in what is present-day western Oconee County, South Carolina, along the Kiowa River. This area was also known as the Savannah River in its lower portion. The biggest and principal town of the Cherokee Indians in the lower towns was Kiowa. This town was densely populated by the Cherokee Indians who lived in harmony. Some other Cherokee Indian towns on the Kiowa River included Atasto and Sugartown. Throughout western North Carolina, the Cherokee Indians also lived in what was known as the Valley, Middle, and Outer Towns. These were located along the major rivers of the Taycassagee, Upper Little Tennessee, Hiwassee, French Broad, and others. Overhill Cherokee occupied towns along the Little Tennessee River and Upper Tennessee River on the western side of the Appalachian Mountains.